Andy today is going to be talking to us about Tableau techniques for top-notch spatial analytics. And so I'm going to pass it off to Andy so we can learn a little bit about mapping and spatial analytics. And Andy, over to you now.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Spatial is my absolute favorite thing to teach at the data school. And we do a lot of it in Alteryx and we do a lot of it in Tableau. I'm going to take you through 4 different examples. We're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to look at the London bus network. We're going to look at airline routes. And I'm going to explain some of the differences in how data has to be shaped in Tableau in order to draw these things. And then the last thing, we're going to wrap up with looking at some data about rats in New York. This is my absolute favorite data set. So in New York, you can call 311, report a rat location, and that data is actually collected. So really, really obscure but interesting data set. And we're going to wrap it up with an emoji map that shows where cats are going to be most excited to find the rats. Hopefully you'll enjoy that one when it comes around. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to connect to some data here. And I wisely put them all in the same spot. So I'm just going to start with this bus stops data. And this data set is pretty simple. We have the route, and hopefully I'll just draw this down here. We've got the route, and the sequence field means, which stop number is it along the route. So the first stop, second stop, etc. And then the name of the stop. So these are unique for each route and sequence combination. And then the actual location of the bus route. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is that Tableau does a sampling of the data when it determines what the data type is. And you'll notice this one came in as a continuous measure because Tableau scanned the data and said, oh, this looks like numbers. Well, the problem is they're not all numbers. Some of them have a letter in them, like there is an X26 bus. I used to ride a bus that was the H37. So if we leave this as a continuous number, it is going to, those records are going to fall out of the data set, and we don't want that. So I'm going to change the data type to a string. Notice how it's still green. Hopefully you can see it's green. What I really want is I want it to be discrete, not continuous. So when I go over to my sheet now, Tableau puts it down here as a measure, and it's just going to try to count the routes. Well, I don't want that. I want those to be discrete items. So I'm just going to drag it up to my dimensions, and there we go. So Tableau will now not automatically aggregate it. So we have these 2 fields, latitude and longitude. And if I just double click on either of those, or both of those, sorry, I get a single dot that looks like it's in the middle of London. Now, it does that because Tableau has taken the average of all of the latitudes and longitudes. We need to put some kind of dimension in the view, sorry, not a dimension, a discrete field in the view in order to split up the view. So in other words, if I now drag the route field onto detail, because it is a discrete dimension, Tableau is going to split up the view by route. Okay, so I'm going to just show the highlighter here, and let me find maybe, for example, the H37, the one I used to run or ride. I didn't run it. And you'll see there's just a single dot for the H37. Again, that's because we've told Tableau only split it up by route. What we wanted to do ideally is we wanted to split it up by route and by stop name. Okay, so now if I look at the H37, so there you can see the H37. But it's not a line, it's just a bunch of dots. So what we want to do is we want to change our mark type from automatic to a line. And I now want to put the sequence onto the path. But also notice how Tableau put that sequence field down here in the measures. And it did that because it's trying to help you sort of categorizing the data. But I don't want the sequence field to be aggregated. So I'm going to drag that up to my dimensions so that by default, it's not aggregated. And now I have a natural sequence, so 1 through whatever. So I'm going to put that on the path shelf. And now we can see, okay. Now I could see, for example, the H37. I could see the route for the H37. But that is composed of multiple points. So down here on the very lower left-hand side of Tableau, so down here on the lower left, you can see that we have 28,000 marks. So that's how many things Tableau has drawn in this picture. So there's 28,270 unique combinations of route and stop name. So I'm going to click on the size and reduce the size all the way down. I don't know why it's putting this little selector thing low down here. And I'm going to set the color to red because then it can look like buses in London. Right. But what I want to do now is I want to, instead of these being individual points, you see how they're all individual points here. I want to be able to look at each of these as a solid line. So in other words, let me just filter down to Route 81 just to make it easier, or I'll just do Route 1, doesn't matter. Okay, there's 29 marks if we look down on the lower left, because there's 29 stops. But instead of this being 29 marks, I want it to be 1 mark. So I want to have one line that represents the whole thing. Now, I want to do that because I want to get the distance of each route. If I look at the distance calculation in Tableau, so if I just scroll down to distance, it requires a starting point and an ending point. The problem here is that requires the data to be next to each other, not on top of each other. So if we look at our data set, we have the route and the sequence. So the data goes down. If we want to use the distance function or even the make line function in Tableau, the data has to be side by side. So we either need to reshape the data in Tableau. The problem with that is we would have to have the sequence field all the way across the view, and we have no idea how many sequences we have because every bus route is different. So that's where something like Alteryx comes into play. So over in Alteryx, I've gone ahead and already built my workflow. So what I've done here is I've just imported the data, and then in Alteryx, I've taken each of the stops and turned it into a spatial point. And then there is a tool called polybuild that allows me to take each of those points and turn it into a line. So now if I look at the data in Alteryx, you can see I've got all these maps here. So if I click on the number 1, you can sort of see it highlighted in this view, but Alteryx is really terrible at visualization. So what I'm going to do now is I'll go to a new sheet, and I'm going to connect to that data source now. And bus routes. And if I go to sheet 2, and now if I double click on my spatial field that was created in Alteryx, notice I only have 1 mark now, and it rendered really, really quickly. Now, I only have 1 mark because I haven't told Tableau how to split up the view. So that's where the route field comes in handy. So if I drag route onto detail, I now get a line for each individual route, right? So notice how much quicker the interactivity is. So where's the number 1 route there, right? So that's 1 mark. So if you click on it, down on the bottom left of Tableau, you see it's 1 of 736 marks. What I want to do now is I want to know, well, what have the traffic patterns been like for each of these stops over the years? So I'm going to edit my data source, and I'm going to add a second data source. And this one is my bus stats. And now in my bus stats, I have the route number, and then how many kilometers it ran, and then the usage recorded. That's basically the number of passengers. Okay, so I'm going to double click on my extract to bring up my join window, and I do that because I hate the data model. I'm going to bring in a union, and then I'm going to grab each of my fields here, or each of my tables. This is one Excel file that has multiple tabs in it. I'm going to bring those into the view. Click on OK. And then now Tableau is trying to join up route and then the route union. Okay, so it looks like we're all good there. I have some repeated columns, so I'm going to just hide the route union. This spatial field, I'm going to rename this just as path, just so it makes a bit more sense to me in my head. And instead of usage recorded, I'm going to call this passengers. And then the sheet field and table field. So these are the names of the sheets in the data source. So I'm just going to call this maybe year, because it's just a range of years. It goes 2010 to 2011, 2011, 2012, etc. And I don't need this field either. So I'm cleaning up the data as I go along. So let's go back over to our sheet now. And if I put the number of passengers, let's say we put that onto size. And we can see, so let me, can we see it a bit? Yeah, so it's kind of hard to see here, but some of them are larger than others. Just take my word for it. So for example, down here, this one has 8.9 million passengers in that year. Of course, that one has the same 65 million here for the Route 106, et cetera. So 57 million for the Route 4. So people take the bus a lot in London. But what I want to do is I want to split this up over across the year. So I'm going to drag the year field. I'm actually going to put it on the pages shelf because I'm interested to know, maybe what was the impact of COVID during this time. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the play button and sort of see what happens. Hopefully it does something here. It's playing. There you go. So 2020, 2021, we can see ridership goes down. So there's 2019, 20, and then it goes down once we hit COVID. Not very useful. That's okay. So that's part of the analytical process. As you get an idea, you might think it's going to be interesting in your head, but it's not. So what I would probably do here instead is maybe look at the route and the passengers and then just sort them that way. And then what I could do is in my tooltip. So let me go back here. Let me duplicate this sheet, get rid of the year. So what I would do now is in my tooltip, I'm going to just insert the map. So insert sheet 2.2. And now let's see if that works, right? So here I can now get the route and the number of passengers and things like that. And now that I actually have these as lines, I can calculate, or no, I can't calculate the distance because again, if I look at my data, I only have one mark for each route. So what I would need to do is I would need to go back into Alteryx and I would need to bring in another tool called the spatial info tool. And I would need to get the length in, we'll do miles and kilometers because I'm sure some of you like some and some like the other. And then now in Tableau, I should be able to just refresh the data source. Hopefully, there it goes. And then I'm going to make these both an average. And I'll put kilometers onto the, maybe onto the tooltip. And now when I hover over, oh, it's not going to tell me because I can't now hover over the map. Okay, anyway, so we can see how long each of these routes is. So let's move on to the next example. So now we want to look at airline routes. And we're going to look at airline routes because in the last example, I showed you how the data had to be tall in order to kind of play connect the dots in Tableau. Or, to be able to draw. So if I go back here to the first sheet, I had to have the data tall in order to be able to draw this. If the data is side by side, like an origin and a destination, then I can draw a line in Tableau. So I'm going to connect to a new data source, and it is my airline routes. And we can see we've got the airline ID. We've got a bunch of stuff here. So this is looking at, so this data set is all of the routes that every airline runs from every airport. So quite a massive data set. What type of plane it is, whether or not it's a code share. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and filter out the code shares. So I'm going to exclude the yeses because I don't want to see code shares. 0 would mean direct flights, equipment. Okay, doesn't really matter. They spelled airport wrong here, so I'm going to fix that because that would really annoy me. But we don't have the latitude and longitude. So I'm going to also hide a couple of fields while I'm here just to kind of clean up the data. And okay, so hide. And now, so instead of this being source airport, I'm going to call this origin airport because that just makes more sense in my head. And I have a second data set here that has the airports. And again, I'm going to go into my join. And we want to say the destination airport is equal to the LATA code. And then I also want to say, okay, so that's going to give me, actually, let me change this to the origin airport. So this is going to give us the information for the origin. I'm going to bring that airport list in again. And this time I'm going to connect it to the destination. So LATA code. Okay, there we go. So now on the right-hand side, I've got a bunch of things over here. I can see I have the latitude and longitude, etc. So let's go to our sheet now. And you could clean some of these things up. So for example, GPS code, home link, LATA code. There's a lot of things I actually don't need here. So I like to go ahead and clean these up while I'm here. Name is the name of the airport. Okay, so I'm going to hide all of those. And then the same fields probably exist here. Oops, let me undo. I didn't mean to hide all of them because I want to keep the country code. Yeah, we'll keep country and region. So let's hide those. And we're just going to keep continent, country, and region. Country, region, and then we're going to hide the rest. Okay. And what I'm going to do is this one is my destination. So I'm just going to rename this one as destination, or maybe just DEST. Again, just trying to make sure that I understand what these field names mean, because it gets very confusing to me. This is like watching me try, I know. And then down here in the bottom, we've got the number of stops. Now that's not, I guess that's something, I'm going to change that to an average. Elevation, okay, so this latitude and longitude here. So this one, I'm going to rename this as my origin. And this one is going to be my, where's my rename? Origin. And then this one I'm going to rename as destination. And then this one as destination. Or I could call it destination latitude, destination longitude. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of calculated fields. So I'm going to create a point for my origin. So I'm going to use the make point function. And that requires two fields to be passed to it. The first one is the latitude. So I'm going to do my origin latitude, comma, origin longitude. Oh, I think I made the text a bit too big. There we go. And click on OK. And then I'm going to create another one. That is my destination. You'll see why I'm actually creating these as separate calculations in a minute. So again, make point, and we want to do destination, latitude, comma, destination, longitude. Okay, so now if I just double click on origin, you'll see I get all of the airports that are in the data set. I only get one mark because I haven't told Tableau how to split the view up yet. So if I wanted to split it up by airport, so I could put origin airport on there, and now I have 433 airports in my data set. Okay, so now that we have 2 points, I can create lines. So I'm going to create another field. I'm going to call this my maybe my route. I'll call it, or maybe I'll call it flight path. And this time I'm going to use the make line function. Now over here on the right-hand side, you can see that it requires a start point and an end point, but both of these have to be points. So what I could have done is I could have said make line and then repeated my make point functions in there again, but I don't tend to do that because I might need to use these fields again later. So I'm just going to put origin in there and then destination. So again, I could have rewritten these, make point latitude longitude, make point latitude longitude, but I know I'm going to reuse these fields multiple times, so I don't want to have to write the calculations out multiple times. Okay, so now we have that. I can double click on my flight path and I see, so let me make this really small. And I can see all of the flight paths around the world. Maybe I'll shrink down the opacity, something like that. But again, it's only one mark. So I need to tell Tableau how to split up that view. And we want to split it up by the route. So, but the route field we don't have. We have an origin airport and we have a destination airport, but we don't have a route. So we're going to build that. So let's create another calculated field. I'm going to call this one route. And it's just simply going to be the origin airport plus, and then a hyphen, plus the destination airport. So really simple. And let's drag that to the detail shelf and let's see how many marks we get now. So we get 14,710 marks in the view. Okay. So now if I wanted to look at, now I could create these calculations, the origin and destination calculations, because my data was next to each other. So if I go in and look at the data again, and if I scroll to the right here a bit, maybe if it lets me, you'll see that I have my latitude and longitude, or sorry, my origin fields. Come on, why is it not scrolling? This is annoying. I have these fields here for my origin, and then I have these fields here for my destination. So that gives me this origin point, and then there's a destination one somewhere, but they're next to each other, which is why I can build a line in Tableau. So let's say we want to look at all flights for British Airways. And we can now see all the places that it flies to. And now that we have these lines, I can use the distance function in Tableau. So I'm going to create another calculated field, and I'm just going to call it distance. And there's a function called distance. And again, this one requires you to make 2 points. I don't want to have to retype those calculations. So that's why I created origin and destination. Another good reason to do that is because you might make a mistake in one of the calculations. If your origin calculation is wrong, you have to fix it in one place. If you do it as a make point and repeat that over and over again, you might have multiple places where you have to fix that. And then the units, let's do kilometers and hit OK. I'm doing kilometers just to annoy the Americans. And I'm going to set the default property to average. And then let's put the distance on to, it doesn't really matter. Let's just stick it on, I don't know, detail. And now when we hover over, we can see the distance in each of these flights. So London to Narita is 9,615 kilometers, and HND, I don't know what HND airport is. Okay, so what we could do is we could put origin airport onto the tooltip. And then I can see the origin air. Oh, it just tells me HND. That's not very helpful, is it? I thought I had a name field somewhere. Oh well, I think I deleted it by accident. Show hidden fields. Name. Yeah. Unhide. Okay, so I want to put name on here instead. Maybe not. There we go. So now I can see it's, oh, so that's my, oh, you know what it's doing? It's doing it in both directions because the flight does go both ways. So that makes sense. Yeah, so that's how you do make lines in Tableau for airline routes. We could then also maybe filter down to, let's maybe change it to, I think Delta is the largest in the world. So let's do DL. And you'll see there's flights everywhere. This is kind of crazy. And let's say that we want to look at just those that originate in the US. And now we can see all of the flights that originate from the US. And maybe we want to look at the origin airport of Atlanta. And now we can see all of the places that Delta flies directly out of Atlanta. So that is airline routes. And does anybody have any questions along the way? I'm going to actually skip the storm paths for now and switch over to the RATS data so that we can, so I don't take up too much time. So, and hopefully I put that data here, RAT settings. There we go. First thing I always do is rename my data source. So I want to change this to, actually, I'm going to create an extract first. And that way, RAT settings, hopefully it runs faster. So my created date field, that's going to be a date. I don't know if I'm going to need that or not. But again, I have my latitude and longitude fields. And what I want to do is I'm going to, let's see, and it's going to be latitude, longitude. Okay. And now if I double click on that, I can see every RAT sighting in New York. Okay. Again, it's just one mark right now. If I want to make this, so for example, I could put maybe the unique key, which is each individual record. Let me change this first to be a circle. And I'm going to put unique key onto detail and all. Okay, let me just, maybe I'll just look at data for 2022. All right, so let's hit OK. Hit OK again. Hope that should reduce the number. Okay, so we're down to 822 marks. This is just kind of like a circle map. So okay, I think we're going to need more data than that. So let me edit my data source filters. Let me just bring in maybe 5 years worth of data. Let's see if that's better. Okay, so now we got 75,000 marks. So the kind of regular dot map actually doesn't work very well here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to a density map. And we can get, this is, kind of a traditional sort of heat map. So I'm going to switch my opacity. I'm going to put that all the way up. And then I'm going to choose a different color palette. Let's see. I'm going to use my favorite color palette called Calshit. And and we can increase the intensity. So you can kind of, you can sort of make this look however you want based on, you know, how you adjust the sizes and all that. But we can see around Central Park, there's a lot of rat sightings, but somehow there's none like directly in Central Park. I don't quite understand that. Okay, so that's one thing we can do. Now I want to create, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create what are kind of like a way to like round the data. So I want to aggregate the marks. I want to aggregate marks that are near each other. So I'm going to start with calling this, let's see, let's call this our, we'll do it this way. We'll do a rounded point. And I'm going to do make point again. And this time I'm going to round the latitude. And let's say we do it to, let's say 0 decimal places to start. And then round the longitude to 0 decimal places. Okay, and let's see what that looks like. So you see, we only get 2 dots because I rounded to 0. So let me edit this now. And this is when I would start making the windows a bit smaller so I can see what it's doing in the background. So if I make it 1 decimal, so remember, latitude and longitude are really precise. So let's see what happens as we add more marks. Okay, so it's starting to look a bit better. So let's make it 2. This is where a parameter would have been a good idea. And that looks pretty cool. Maybe we make it 3. And let's look at that. And now it's kind of right. This doesn't look as good now. So I'm going to go back and make it 2. And if I put something on size, let's say we put the rat count onto size, everything's going to be given the same size because we haven't told Tableau how to split up the view yet. Oh, I know what I need to do. Okay, so I messed up. So I'm going to create another calculated field. I'm going to call this one round lat. And I think we said it was 2 decimal places. Yep, 2 was the right one. And then create another calculated field. Let's call this one round lon, and round longitude to 2 decimal places. And now I'm going to make round latitude a latitude, round longitude a longitude. And I want to make those actually dimensions because I want Tableau to split up the view based on all possible combinations of those. Okay, so now I have 812 marks, which looks a lot better. And if I put my rat sighting count onto size, we can get a better idea. This is kind of, you know, it sort of looks like a heat map, I guess. What I would probably do is maybe put a border on and reduce the opacity so we can sort of see through the circles a bit, and maybe increase the size so we can see them overlap, something like that. Now, the problem is when we made it 3 decimal places, it made it too granular. When we made it 1 decimal place, it made it too spread out. So we're kind of stuck with making it 2 decimal places, or we could create hex bins. So if you haven't used hex bin maps before, they're really cool. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a parameter, and I'm going to call this my hex bin adjuster. And I'm just going to leave it as a floating point. Doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to show that parameter. So now I'm going to create a new calculated field. Let me show the calculations here. So I'll call this one hex x. And if I look in my functions here, so hex bin x, what it does is it maps an XY coordinate. So for us, that's a rat sighting to the X coordinate of the nearest hexagonal bin. Basically, it's trying to take things that are close together and group them together. That's the easiest way to think about it. So we're going to do hex bin X, but the coordinates have to be X comma Y. Well, X in a map is longitude comma latitude, right? So that gives us something like that. But in order to, well, I'll just do it like this for now. And this one this is going, oh, let me just create another one now. So hex Y. And this one's going to be hex bin Y in this case. And longitude, comma, latitude. So the setup is the same. Okay, so again, I want to make both of these dimensions. And I want them both to be continuous so that I get an axis. The X field, that's going to be a longitude because we're going across the x-axis. And then the Y, we want to make a latitude. So X and Y, and we get a single mark, right? Okay, so not particularly useful. We want to split this up a bit more, and that's where the adjuster comes into play. So let me edit this calculation now. And what I want to do is I want to take my longitude and multiply it by my adjuster. And then I'm going to take my latitude and multiply it by my adjuster. Hit OK. And do the same thing here. So times adjuster, and then times adjuster. And now this hex bin adjuster allows me to sort of control the density in the map. So if I make it 30, you'll see I get some more things. But what's happening now is if we don't have a map in the background anymore, because if I hover over one of these marks, you'll see that my hex X is what, minus 2000. So there's no such thing as a minus 2000 longitude. Doesn't make any sense at all. So what we have to do is we've now scaled them up based on the hex bin, and then we need to scale them back down to make them a latitude or a longitude. So I want to take that whole result and divide it by the adjuster. The same thing for the Y. So divide it by the adjuster. Now we should see everything back on a map again. So I can control much better the granularity of the number of dots. So if you remember the rounded example, if we had 0 or 1, they were too spread out. If you had 2, it looked good, but you go to 3 and you're way too dense then. So I can make this 200, and everything gets laid out into a nice little grid. So I could even do that and then maybe shrink the size, something like that, right? So you get these really, really pretty looking examples that you can use. So let's go with something like, let's see what 100 looks like. Okay, let's do that. And I'm going to make it a bit bigger so they can kind of fit together nice and neat. All right, so that's how you would create a hex bin map. And if I put the count onto size, we'll see something relatively similar to our previous example, right? So we know we're doing something kind of similar. But if I make this 200, I can now get that granularity. If I reduce the opacity, we have even more granularity than we did in the other map. So there's trade-offs on which way you want to do it. Okay, so let me go back. Let's pretend that you have a pet cat, and you want to know where should you put your pet cat to feed it rats, because your cat, it loves rats plenty. It loves those as snacks. It doesn't like chasing them away. It likes capturing them and eating them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these circles and we're going to turn it into a cat symbol. So to do that, we're going to create a calculated field. And I'm going to call this cat emotions. And this is where we're going to use a function called, so let me go to my table calcs. We're going to use one called window percentile. So this tells me what percentile is each dot within the whole view. So window percentile, and I want to do my rat settings count, but I can't bring that. Oh, can I? Oh yeah, that'll work. Okay, and then I want to say, is it? Let's see. So that's going to give me the percentile. So I want to say if that percentile is greater than or equal to 0.75, so meaning there's a lot of rats there. Let's say that they're happy. Now I'm just going to copy this and paste it. Let me just make this window a bit bigger. So now I'm going to say else if it's maybe greater than 50%, then they are satisfied. Okay, copy, paste. And now if it's greater than or go to 0.25, it's like they're pissed off. And then otherwise they're angry. As you know, cats are generally just angry anyway. Okay, so what am I doing here? We call it integer, you mean float? Oh, what am I doing here? I think I'm using the wrong function, window percentile. Oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. So I want to say if the count of rat sightings, this wrong, is greater than or equal to this, and now I say comma 0.75. So I just called the function the wrong way. So let's make this 1.5. Oops. And then make this one paste 0.25. Okay, so that should get rid of the error. Okay, good. And we want to drag that to, let's put it on our color shelf for now. And we want to compute using every single cell. Okay, so now we get 4 colors. We got the angry, the happy, the pissed off, and the satisfied. So I'm going to reorder these: happy, satisfied, pissed off, and angry. So the happiest cats are going to be in these locations. Okay, great. So what I want to do, though, is I'm going to move this. I'm going to change my mark type to a shape. And I'm going to move my cat emotions to the shape shelf. And now you see we get 4 different shapes. And if I edit my shape shelf, I'm going to go in here to a color palette, or a shape palette I have called cats. So happy cats are going to have hard eyes. Satisfied cats are going to be maybe smiling. The pissed off cats are going to have the little snarl. And the angry cats are going to have the, everybody's probably seen that before. And there we go. We now have our cat map. So if we want to see where the happy cats are, I need to turn on my highlighter. Come on, there we go. We can see the happy cats, the satisfied, etc. So now if I adjust my hex bins, let's say I make it 50, because my cats, they like covering a lot of territory. We can now see a bit better where the happy cats are, satisfied, etc. So just something a bit fun. We could also, let me just show you something different while we're here. So I could instead make this, okay, let me do it this way. Let's make this a circle. And let's set the background to yellow. And then I'm going to make this, so I'm going to duplicate one of these and make it a dual axis. And now on the second one, I want to make this one a shape. And I'm going to put my cat emotions on shape again. Okay, so it duplicated that. So let me just duplicate. Let me just put the new one on here. And oops, I did something wrong there. Okay, so what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to use another palette I have called, where is it? Emoticons. So happy, so that. So if you ever want to make an emoji map, that's how you would do an emoji map. So we've got an emoji map, a cat map, etc. So I will stop there because I'm sure I've taken up too much time.